I hope you found that talk by Dr. Olson interesting. Um, Learned a few things about cancer and cancer treatment. And in the second half of this chapter, we're going to talk about a different type of cell division. We're going to talk about meiosis, and we're going to talk a little bit about sex. But don't worry, it's not the scandalous type of talking about sex. It's the biological way of talking about sex, which maybe isn't as interesting. It's borderline boring to some people, but it does have some interesting ramifications that perhaps we haven't thought about. So, how does sexual reproduction produce genetic variety? Well, good news for you and me and everybody else. You are a unique individual. You are totally unique. There has literally never been anyone on earth quite like you. I don't even know you, but I know that this is true because every human being is a genetically unique individual. Bad news is if you ever need an organ transplant or if you need somebody else's stem cells, the parts that in our bodies are not perfectly intraconvertible. We do our best that we can, but because we are all genetically unique, that means you can't just take my liver and give it to somebody else. Uh, you can perform liver transplants, heart transplants, organ transplants, but it's a very complex process because there's our bodies know what is us and what is not us. And the big part of that comes from being a genetically unique individual. So, who's to blame? How did you get this way? Well, blame your parents. It's their fault. Blame them equally. They are each equally responsible for your genetic uniqueness. They can blame their parents, and so on and so on. And someday your children can blame you and whoever you have as a partner for their genetic uniqueness. It's their fault. More generally, we can blame meiosis for us being so unique. Meiosis means reduction. Because the process of meiosis reduces the number of chromosomes by half. And then when fertilization happens, we restore the number of chromosomes in the offspring. So, how do we get to have the same number of chromosomes as our parents? Well, they took their chromosome number and they split it in half. And then when they produced us, you, me, everyone else, um, the number of chromosomes in the progeny, the offspring, the child, in the case of us humans, is restored to the normal number. So when two parents produce a child, has the same number of chromosomes as both parents, but the offspring only gets half of their genes from each parent. So you're equal parts mom and dad. Okay, furthermore, when your parents pass on half of their genes from their parents, the combination of genes from their parents is reshuffled. So while your mom might be one half grandma and one half grandpa, the genes that she passes on to you can be all kinds of a mix of grandma and grandpa genes. And the same for your father with his parents. And this reshuffling in every generation means that everybody's going to be different, even though the starting material, the DNA, is fairly uniform. Um, so it's analogous to a deck of cards. Every deck of cards that's fair and brand new has 52 cards, 4 suits, and 13 values of the cards from ace on up to king. But what makes card games interesting is that you can shuffle the cards and you can't really predict what's going to happen. There's an astronomical number of ways to arrange those 52 cards in a deck. So that's kind of, I'm not trying to say we're decks of cards, but we're like a deck of cards in that way with our genetic makeup. So, homologous chromosomes. This is a topic that it's a fairly simple topic, but you have to kind of get your mind around it and how this works. So I told you earlier, we saw this slide where we saw sister chromatids as being identical copies of a chromosome. So if there's one copy of chromosome 2, that chromosome 2 actually has two sister chromatids that are identical copies of each other, right? There's that. So homologous chromosomes are both of the set of that pair of that number 2 chromosome. So one came from mom and one came from dad. So it's two pairs of sister chromatids. And are they genetically identical to each other? No, they're not. They have the same genes, so they might have the gene for eye color or for widow's peak or any of a number of things, but they might have different versions of those genes on them. So as you can see in this karyotype here, which is what this type of image is called, we've got 22 sets of chromosomes, and then we've got this set that are marked X. This is a human female karyotype. You can tell because she's got two X chromosomes and not an X and a Y chromosome, which would mean male. We also can see that they're all different colors, so it's really easy to match them all up, like pairs of socks. But one of these, in each of these cases, one of these came from mom and one of these came from dad. We can't really tell which is which from this picture, but it's nice that they're all lined up like this. So you can see that. So homologous chromosomes are both sets of sister chromatids from one form of the chromosome. In this case, chromosome 2. One came from mom, the other came from dad. Okay, so we're going to hammer these two learning objectives out together. How do we explain differences between diploid and haploid cells? What do those words even mean? How many chromosomes are found in each type of cells in people like you and me? And then how is meiosis utilized by living organisms? It's all kind of sort of in the same theme here, so I'm going to talk about them together. So I think I showed this to you earlier, but didn't give you a lot of background. For animals, so all animals function in this way. So even if it's a jellyfish or a dragonfly or a killer whale or presumably the dinosaurs, all animals that we've ever observed seem to work in this way, and that our bodies have two copies of every chromosome pair. So that means we've got 2n, the number of chromosomes. We call that being diploid, which means double the chromosome. So in humans, like we saw in that previous picture, you've got 46 chromosomes. Half of them come from mom and half of them come from dad. And then gametes are the reproductive cells. It's a generalized term for reproductive cells. So a sperm is a type of gamete. An egg is a type of gamete. And gametes are haploid, or we say that they're N, which means half the number of chromosomes. And in humans, that means it's 23. So 46 chromosomes, 46 divided by 2 is 23. So this is how we enable new generations to form without doubling the number of chromosomes in every generation, if we have fertilization going on. So it's kind of weird that we have double and half, and there's no like kind of in between. N means half, and 2n means double. But it's too math for me. So here is an example of, it's obviously not a human, but just for simplicity's sake, we've got an N of 3 is the haploid number, which means our diploid number is 6, or 2 times 3. And you can see these homologous chromosomes. You see we've got one chromosome that's long and one that's kind of in between, and then one set that's small. So here's a set of chromosomes from sister chromatids from dad. Here is the homologous chromosome from mom. You can see it's the same size. In this case, they've been differently colored to make it a little more clear. Here's that middle set of chromosomes, one from mom, one from dad. Those are homologous chromosomes. Here's a homologous pair of homologous chromosomes in the small size. So 3 sets of chromosomes, one from each parent, means that the total number of chromosomes is 6. And then each of those chromosomes has been replicated, duplicated, so that the cell can divide. So what meiosis does is it reduces the number of chromosome sets from diploid to haploid. So first we have to replicate all of the DNA, replicate all of the chromosomes in interphase, just like we did for mitosis. But then meiosis, a lot of the moving parts sound the same, but slightly different things are happening. Okay, it's the subtlety that really we need to master to understand this. So meiosis takes place in 2 sets of cell divisions called meiosis 1 and meiosis 2. And at the end, instead of having 2 daughter cells like we had in mitosis, we end up with 4. And each daughter cell is only going to have half as many chromosomes as the parent cell. All right, so now let's go through and look at, and hopefully you'll be able to illustrate and explain the stages of meiosis. Okay, so the chromosomes duplicate, and then we have 2 sets of cell division that occur. In meiosis 1, the homologous chromosomes, here abbreviated as homologs, are going to pair up and separate. So this is where we go from being diploid to haploid. So those 2 haploid daughter cells have replicated chromosomes. They have the sister chromatids are present. And then in meiosis 2, or equational division, the sister chromatids are going to separate. And what we end up with is 4 haploid daughter cells with unreplicated chromosomes. So each of those 4 daughter cells has something different from the original mother cell. Okay, so let's make it even simpler. Let's look at a case with just 1 set of homologous chromosomes. So the haploid number would be 1. The diploid number would be 2. So these homologous chromosomes are going to replicate, form sister chromatids. Bloop, you can see that here, down here. So we've got sister chromatids and a duplicated pair of homologous chromosomes. In meiosis 1, those homologous chromosomes are going to separate. So how many chromosomes are in these daughter cells? You can see they each have 1. 1. So up here there were 2 because the red and the blue thing, they're not genetically identical. They might have different versions of the same genes, but they are not identical to each other. So this cell has twice as much genetic information as this cell does. Because if you wanted to, if there is a gene on the red chromosome, this cell can't make it. Because all it's got is the blue. And the same vice versa is true for this red chromosome. If there was a gene that was present on this blue chromosome already in this, after meiosis 1, that capability is gone because there's no blue chromosome in that cell. And in meiosis 2, the sister chromatids are going to separate. So after meiosis 1, we've got haploid cells that have duplicated chromosomes. In meiosis 2, we've got haploid cells with unduplicated chromosomes. Okay, let's take another look at that.